Yeah, I made it back. Water pump doesn't sound better than it did. The carburetor, I don't know if it's 100%, or it could just be the fact the fuel in this thing is 8 years old. So I think the might be just go ahead and run this thing out. It's about a quarter tank left, or fill it up with new fresh gas. But first took off, ran real nice, but then starting to stumble again. Brakes work great. Just awkward as hell driving on the floor. When you push on the brake pedal, you just want to slide across the floor pan. So it's kind of hard to really get a good feel for the brake pedal, but it responds a lot better than it did. I think the next step is replace that growly, awful sounding water pump. So next thing I'm going to do is actually flush the coolant out. It looks my consistency of like chocolate milk or mud. So I'm going to get that all rinsed out really, really good and get it back in the garage here and get that water pump addressed. Next stop for Project LeBronze, I'm going to take care of this noisy, wobbly junk water pump. So that's not too hard of a changeover, so I'm not sure how far I'm going to drag you along, but there's one very important tip I want to give to you before installing a replacement water pump. There's one thing particular about Pontiacs that sometimes has some overheating issues afterwards. Stay tuned, I'll show you what that is. The next little project here on Project LeBronze is going to be the water pump. That thing's growling, awful, horrible, noisy garbage. To get to that, of course, you got to take the two belts off. Alternator belt, power steering belt, get those out the way. Just a handful of bolts that actually hold that water pump to the front of the engine, to the timing cover. Now on Pontiacs, there's a little trick I'm going to show you, so definitely stay tuned to that. You know, if you think you know it all, or maybe you already know this tip. When it comes to there's a metal spacer tying the back of the water pump, it's very, very critical how that's spaced to prevent an overheating problem. It actually causes the pump to cavitate or fail. So I'm going to show you that, but if there's any kind of obstacles on the way, I'll drag you along. For the most part, I'm just going to rip this water pump off there and show you that little tip and then get this thing back together. Well, here's what we got. The water pump's pretty easy to change up. I'm going to pull the shroud out, took the one bolt out there, flip the shroud back. Then we get to the 4 bolts that hold the fan on. And the idea of maybe not having to take the belt or take a belt adjustments all the way loose. I got 1, 2, 3. I got the 4th one to get out of there. I'm gonna pull the fan pulley and the shroud, everything out of the way, and give me a whole lot more room to work. So I guess step 1, pop the shroud. Step 2, pull the 4 bolts out of the fan. The fan taken loose from the engine. So now I should be able to, you should say, wrestle that out of there. All right, fan's out of the way. Put it up there for safekeeping, or maybe that's a supercharger. All right, shroud. You can really see the business end of all this here. Now, at that point, I didn't take the adjustment loose on the alternator or the power steering. I'm gonna try to sneak that back together. One of those quick tips to make things a little easier. Ugh, gross. That's disgusting. Anyway, that water pump's been leaking for a while, so not for long. Ooh. Yeah, it's pretty bad. So the next thing is all the attaching hardware. There's probably about 6, 7, 8 bolts. I don't actually know how many, but need to get all those off there. They can pop the water pump off the front of the engine. Now the plan of leaving the power steering and alternator in place, not take it loose, isn't going to work in this case on this car because the power steering bracket's right over top of one of the attaching bolts. So I'm going to have to take the power steering loose after all and swing it out of the way. Got the water pump out of the way. Now, you can actually still see some steam coming off this car here. It's actually still kind of warm from doing my test drive. I'm kind of wondering now if that helped where I got these bolts, since this aluminum housing is still a little warm from driving it. Normally these bolts like to break off or twist off. Even the real long ones actually came out with minimal effort. Still a little rust inside here. It did drag a little, but they actually came out. But the thing I wanted to say when it comes to Pontiac, there's a rubber bushing inside here. The sleeve actually is loose, but that rubber bushing, if it's deteriorated, cracked, or missing, well, you're going to have an overheating problem. There's 2 of them. 1 and 2. If they're both there and intact, well, that's going to be step 1 for making sure you don't have an overheating issue. And the other thing is when you put the water pump on, the water pump itself has a spacer plate or a divider plate that actually separates the 2 parts, inlet and outlet. Now the situation becomes, when you mount this in the car, the gap between the impeller blade and this back face needs to be as close as possible without touching. If you got a big gap, you actually lose a lot of efficiency of the water pump. So let's take a look at this one here. If you look between the blade and the impeller, it's kind of hard to get the angle right, but I've almost got nearly it. Oh, It looks like, yeah, that's actually pretty close on this one. But the idea is you want that as close as you can get it without touching. Now, thing to keep in mind, there's a gasket goes between this metal panel and the water pump. So I put that gasket in there. It's actually just about touching right now. I put that gasket in, this would be just about right, but I've seen some as much as an 1/8 inch or larger gap. If you have that situation, you just kind of keep working this edge with a body hammer kind of in a circle and check your clearance. But you want to get it as close as you possibly can get it without it touching. That's one of the biggest things you say for helping keep the old Pontiac from overheating. But this one actually looks pretty good, so I'll say green light to put that thing back together, a couple new gaskets. All right, well, I got the water pump area all cleaned up, gasket area ready to reinstall the new water pump. And it made mention that I was going to flush out the coolant before changing this water pump, but for some reason, the coolant that drained out of it is actually green and pretty, but what was dumping out of that water pump, I mean, must have been some kind of magic dirt filter, but that's what was hitting the ground, so I just assumed the whole cooling system was full of this brown sludge, but it's actually really clean, so that makes me feel a whole lot better about the engine and the car. So next step, slap that thing back on there. Isn't TV magic wonderful? Like, press the button or blink of an eye, it's all back together. No more wiggling the bearing. It actually feels real good. Belts are tight. Radiator shroud back in, hoses back on, fill it full of coolant. So I think a moment of truth is hook the old battery back up. See if this thing's nice and quiet now. Of course, this car just starts so nice. Wow, okay. It doesn't sound like a graveling graveyard of madness, so that's actually really nice. Well, accomplished a lot more on the checklist. 68 LeBronze, no more budget bird. I kind of thought that was cute, but this is much more clever. So now we've actually got the water pump taken care of. Not sure about the heater core yet. Carburetor's working more gooder. Disc brake conversion's all done. So we're honestly down to fixing the power top. I think I was going to do that as an entire separate episode. Getting the power top operational, that might be some good information. Then clean and install the interior and give the car a bath. So super close to being completely done. Well, that's a Saturday evening, all gone pretty well. I actually finished the disc brake conversion, got that all done. Went for a little test drive. Stops a whole lot better and actually drives pretty good. Now, it didn't drive bad before, even with the twisted, jacked up, broken floors. It actually didn't drive bad. So surprisingly, it still drives as good. And then we got the water pump taken care of. It doesn't sound like a screaming banshee anymore going down the road. So big plus on that. It's not marking its territory. So we got that squared away. A few minor details left, and this car is going to be going down the road and get out of the garage and start on one of the other projects here in the old vinyl village. And of course, as you can see, it's dark outside. It's just about 8 o'clock. It's time to shut down. Of course, it's getting close to winter time, so it gets dark a whole lot sooner. So if you like what we're doing here in the old vinyl village garage, I guess the show really started out as just about anything automotive inside of a 2-car garage. I guess still staying true to that theme, but kind of focusing on the old Pontiacs a whole lot because I guess they're my favorite, and I just seem to be finding them. But I do have a Chevy too, 67 Nova. Friend of mine, I've known about the car about 20 plus years. He wants to do a little work on this, so I may poke my head in there and see if we can come up with a plan, maybe doctor that thing up too. But of course, I've got 2 other Firebirds I need to get together. Besides all that, anyway, if you see what we're doing, I guess you like what we're doing, please subscribe, share with your friends. Anything you want me to add some content on, anything on these cars, I've got cars in different various stages of the restoration, overhaul, or repair. I'll definitely shoot you up a video on how to do that if any kind of questions, because I've probably been there, done that, and probably screwed it up twice to getting it there. So I can at least tell you how not to do it, if anything. So anyway, I've had enough fun here today. Been a long Saturday. Great things accomplished. Getting close to the end of this project of Project LeBronze, and then off to its new home. So appreciate you following us on this journey, and we'll see you next time.